So imagine three circles. The first circle is you do best, the problems you love to solve, where you have some expertise, you have some edge. The second is there's the problems customers want solved and are willing to pay to have solved. The third is appropriate winning pricing. You've got to find the third circle where you charge what will sustain you, what will grow your business.
It's not just about the growth of the business. It's not just about the financial stability of the business. It's kind of a mix.
Now, if you don't have those three circles intersecting with a sweet spot, you don't have a business model.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Business Growth Pod. I'm your host, Allan Draper. So thankful that you're spending some time with me today. I know you're busy and I appreciate that. Make sure to leave me some feedback, leave me a review and a rating. Let me know how we're doing. Let me know what types of episodes you're enjoying, what subjects we can cover to help you in your entrepreneurial endeavors and efforts. Today, I would like to welcome to the show Martin Riley. Martin is the author of The Business Jet Engine, the simplest guide to boost your business. Martin is a business and leadership coach with over 20 years experience in the coaching industry. His core skill, check this out, is using the business jet engine in getting business owners and their teams focused on the tasks that really matter so they make stress-free, profitable progress each year to build the business of their dreams. I love that. Welcome to the show, Martin. We're so glad to have you.
It's an absolute pleasure to be here, Allan.
So that's interesting. Just the other day, I was chatting with somebody about this exact topic of the struggle that entrepreneurs face when they're starting a business, and even once the business is up and going, focusing on, deciding which tasks to focus on and how important that is. And I think it affects so many facets of a business. I shared a story with this individual about when I started my first non-real estate business. It was a pest control company, and I started with my brother. And I remember before we had our business license, our pesticide license, any vehicles, any equipment, an office, any office furniture, any employees, payroll setup, before we had any of those things, I remember I was sitting at a desk working on a sales script that future call center employees would follow, to stay consistent with our branding and things like that. And I remember my brother looking over at me, and we were in our little apartment that we were sharing. And at the time we had a desk out in the living room and our computer on the desk. And so we're, a foot or two from each other. And he's like, "Why are you working on that? Why are you working on developing sales scripts for people that we're not going to hire for a year, 2 years? And, we don't even have a pesticide license. We can't even operate our business." And so I think that's, that was 9 years ago, still working on the progress and the process. But give us some tips. How does the entrepreneur, the business owner, the founder, how do they decide which tasks merit their time and attention?
Well, it's such a great question. And the challenge is most business owners are great at what they do. They're not business experts, which makes it, doubly, quadruply challenging. That they're often figuring it out as they go. I mean, you've got, serial entrepreneurs like yourself who maybe have that experience. They've been there before, but many they're starting out. And the thing is, they're often great at what they do, but even that is challenging enough. So the real art is first you've got to get your business model right. And for me, there's three key things to consider with that, which we can come back to. So fundamentally, your business model is off whack, you're going to struggle whatever you do. The second thing is, and this is what the business jet engine is all about, is business is a whole system. And I've identified sort of 17 key parts that make a business work at its best. And you've got to see that as an interrelated system with cause and effect to then go, actually, if I was going to choose one to work on, what has the biggest knock-on effect? So there's not a quick answer other than you've got to understand business as a system. You've got to see the whole thing. You've got to get in place. You've got to start with the end in mind and then go, what next? If I was building a machine, typically, you start with the chassis, then you add the bits that go on top and the casings last. And a business is a bit the same. There's a kind of order and a journey most owners go through when they put one together.
Yeah, 100%. That's interesting because, there isn't a really clear answer, which is the case with a lot of things with business. So let's talk about some of the factors. So when there's an entrepreneur that's deciding, what to spend their individual time on, it's not just about the growth of the business. It's not just about the financial stability of the business. It's not just about the trajectory of the business. It's not just about the things that they personally want to spend time on. It's kind of a mix of, putting out fires. You mentioned one of the habits of highly effective people, and that's, seeing the end from the beginning. And another one is, working on things in quadrant 2, which are things that are important, but not necessarily urgent. So what are the factors, if we can't identify, which makes sense, specific things that somebody should work on? There's different individuals, there's different company sizes, different industries, all these things. What should the mentality of the business owner be when deciding? And should they be proactive about it? Should they spend 30 minutes a day, or should they just, hey, I'm going to just start moving stuff around and figure it out later?
It's hard to put an exact time, but it is taking time out at regular intervals, at least several times a week as the owner, to step back and go, strategically, what next? So I want to give you some specifics, otherwise it will sound incredibly vague. So if I just talk you through some of those basics that have to be in place. So let's take the business model where you start. The 3 things. So imagine 3 circles. The first circle is there's what you do best, the problems you love to solve, where you have some expertise, you have some edge, you're in some way more passionate, more skilled than others at solving that kind of problem. The second is there's the problems customers want solved and are willing to pay to have solved. So imagine those 2 circles intersecting. You've got to find the overlap. The third is appropriate winning pricing. You've got to find the third circle where you charge what will sustain you, what will grow your business profitably, and customers think is great value because that's worth solving their problem at that price. Now, if you don't have those 3 circles intersecting with a sweet spot, you don't have a business model. Something is out of whack. With one of your others guests, you were talking about, being passion-centered, purpose-driven. If you're not great at what you do and care about it, someone will come along who is. Unless you're stuck with monopolies or cowboys, generally, if someone is more passionate, more committed, more driven, given the choice, you go to them. So those 3 circles have to be right first. But then after that, once you've got your business model right, there's growing your business. So I can probably be most helpful if I explain the journey most owners go on, which lays out the 17 key parts as the jet engine model. So are you up for that?
I'm up for it.
Okay. So most business owners starting out, they understand you got to have a problem you solve for your customers,
Absolutely.
your product or service. And that can be a task in itself. Then you've got to look after your customers, your customer service. And then there's your operations, how you deliver that product or service. And that looks like a pretty onerous task. You just talk about your pest control and doing the scripts, et cetera, a ton to do just to get that organized. But that's the heart of business. And that becomes the heart of our jet engine metaphor. But it's just the beginning. And what happens is your business owner, they get into business. They may have brought some friends, some contacts, people who said, yeah, I love what you're going to do. We'll work with you. And they're really busy for 3, 6, 9 months. And then they go, but where's the next bit of business? There's not enough repeat business. They thought it was going to take off by word of mouth. And it's like having an engine sitting there with no air coming in to make it work. So they've got to get the air right. That's the sales and marketing. So you've got your marketing, you've got to convert that into sales. Out of the engine, you have happy customers. You've got to get customer feedback. This is a feedback loop, which helps you remarket to your existing customers and turbocharge or supercharge your marketing to new customers, because client testimonials, client feedback is great for marketing material. So that's your kind of your sales and marketing loop. So our business owner, they get much better at that. 2 years on, they've been working really hard, and their accountant says, you owe this much tax. And they go, but I've got no money in the bank. They've been working so hard, they've not really paid attention to the profits, to the cash in the bank. And that's when they realize they've got to get serious about finance. This is the fuel. So that includes, it starts with pricing. That's getting the fuel in the engine. Out the back, you have your exhaust gases. That's your profit. Efficient engines recycle your exhaust like a turbocharger. That's your reinvestment. And how do you manage that? All your engine management system. That's your management accounts. So that's your fuel cycle. Then you've got to hire your people better, because you've got your engine there. It's working really well. Till now, most business owners hire casually. They're not careful enough. And that's your wing. If your wing's upside down, it's going to grind you down. Mm-hmm. So with your wing, you've got to get the right quality and quantity of staff, and you've got to have your HR and leadership processes to get the best control, best influence out of your people. So you go where you want to go. Brilliant. You've got your jet plane up in the air. That's illegal and dangerous. You've got to know where you want to go. You've got to have plans. So you need your captain in the cockpit with his plans, short, medium, and long term. And then you've got to have your dashboard, your targets, your goals, your KPIs, so you know if you're on track or off track and can course correct. So by the time you put all of that together, you've got 17 key parts to a business that a business owner has to get right. And what I do with the jet engine is, when they score for where they want to be in a year's time, how well are they doing in each area out of 10? They can look at their business as a system and go, actually, if I was to fix or improve just one of these, but have the biggest impact, put me into the best place a year from now, which would I fix? And that suddenly gives us strategic insight. And then most people go, what's the second? What's the third? So by seeing your business as a system, you can start to make strategic decisions of which 1, 2, or 3 things to really work on.
I think that's just something that a lot of entrepreneurs, especially the ones that you mentioned earlier, that they have a skill, they're bringing kind of some knowledge of, whatever experience they came from, whatever industry they came from. And, it reminds me of Michael Gerber's book, The E-Myth. And he uses the analogy of a baker. She's the best baker in town. Everybody loves her muffins and everything, right? It's just, and so she decides to hang a shingle. And the issue is, she's a really good baker, but when you start a business, the amount of time that you have to focus on your trade or your specific technical skill or whatever drastically decreases. Yeah. It happens in every industry. Somebody's like, hey, I'm actually really good at this. I'm going to start a business. And it's not the same thing. And some people are able to make that connection where they're like, okay, I'm able to take this skill, kind of transform it a little bit. I know a lot about the technical aspects of it, but I'm going to build a business around that. I think one thing, Martin, people really have a hard time with is, I think, operating the business, but I think a lot of them, like the baker in Michael Gerber's book, she just wanted to bake. And people start a business and they're like, I really like, I don't know, painting cars. And then they're like, oh, but somebody's got to write the checks to the paint company, and somebody's got to write the checks to the employees and pay the lease and do the taxes and do all these things. What would it be? What would you recommend to somebody that's coming from, they're coming from a skilled position where they have this experience, they want to start their own business in that same industry? What are some things that you would kind of help them put in place in terms of a structure with how they use their time and how they can build a business as opposed to simply just creating a job for themselves.
Yeah. And my first career was in product design. And one of the things I learned is when you designing a complex machine, you don't want to perfect each corner of that machine from the very beginning, because you end up with all your problems in the final corner. So I'm a huge believer in iteration and refinement and adding detail over time. So it's really about those 17 key parts I spoke about. It's getting just very simple processes and procedures in place for each of those early. They don't have to be super complex because the business isn't complex yet. So it's about understanding what's required and putting very simple ways of solving those problems in place, and then improving them, developing them as you grow and scale. And that, one of your previous guys, again, the same guy talking about being very purpose driven, who you hire is so key, so critical. You've got to hire great people, and you've got to develop them and trust them, so that then you have the skill sets to build the business around you, so you're not trying to do it all yourself. But that's a very hard bridge for most business owners to make if they're not developing a profitable business, which is why quite early on they need to look at their numbers very simply. And one of the big mistakes I would say is a lot of business owners are scared of their numbers. And the trick there is to simplify the numbers down. I will sometimes ask a potential new client, okay, what's your average order value? Or what is your average product cost, or your average service cost? And they go, well, all sorts, Martin. It depends who I'm selling to. It could be $50, it could be $20,000. And I go, okay, if I forced you to give me one price that's your average, what would it be? And okay, and then I go, so it's $10,000 or it's $5,000. How many of those do you need to sell in a month to break even? So it's simplifying your numbers down, so you've got some simple targets. And it may be you go, okay, we have a £10,000 product, a £5,000 product, and a £100 product. That's the average. So you then have 3 bandings, but keep it simple. Don't confuse yourself, but at least you know roughly what you've got to sell in a month to break even, and how many you have to sell in a month to make a profit. And if that looks like a bad story, maybe don't start or rethink your business model back to the 3 circles and go, what will people pay at the price I need to charge to make that profit? So I can actually then deliver on the numbers that are achievable. Otherwise, you're always going to struggle.
This is a really fantastic idea, and you kind of glossed over the first part of it, but this idea of, I'm going to try to rephrase what you said and see if I'm getting the point across. Make sure that the sophistication of your business and your business practices matches the level that your business is actually at. So, for example, going back to my story about me working on these complex call scripts, a year and a half before I had anybody to use them, it probably wasn't the best thing at the time to be working on. And it reminds me of a conversation I had with a gentleman that had just recently started his business. And he was, we were talking about, I'm trying to remember something very specific. Maybe it was the vehicles, the specific vehicles that he was using to operate his business. He didn't have any other employees yet, but he was, planning on making a hire. And he was talking about, how he spent, tens and 20s of hours on researching these vehicles. And he knew everything about them. He knew all the pros and cons, the costs, like how long they would last, how many miles you could put on them a year, all these things, gas mileage, you name it. And then I stopped him and I said, how are you going to get customers in the door?
Yes.
And he's like, oh, well, and just kind of hemmed and hawed, didn't really have an answer. I'm like, you clearly have a lot of great research capabilities. You're clearly passionate about what you're doing. But let's put first things first. And when I was talking to him, it was very clear to me, like, hey, he's not spending his time doing the things that he needs to do. But it's funny how sometimes as entrepreneurs, it's easier to see it in others than it is in ourselves, right? Because for
Absolutely.
him, Martin, he was really hung up on these vehicles. And I was like, what is this guy talking about? Like, let's get some revenue in the door. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to hire anybody to drive the vehicles.
Well, I bet you've seen this so many times, but most business owners build their business to their strengths. If they're really into sales, it's a sales organization. If they're a finance guy, it's all about the numbers. If they're a people person, it's all about the people, but they're ignoring the numbers. People neglect the areas they're weakest and build the business around their strengths. So if this guy was into research, he knows his facts, he knows his figures, he's going to avoid the difficult thing of actually, let's talk to some people. And I want to come back to this idea of prototyping because it's such a powerful one. In those early stages, testing, prototyping, whatever you're doing, if you want to sell your product or service, just go out and talk to some people. And if you can't get in a conversation someone's eyes to light up as you're describing what you can do for them or their friends or their loved ones or their business contacts, if they don't go, wow, I know someone who really needs that, you're going to struggle to sell it online. You're going to struggle to get marketing material right because you can't engage someone in a conversation. So every idea should be tested and prototyped as quickly, cheaply, simply as possible. Just use whatever you've got. When I used to design things, we'd often, grab big bottles of, soda for laying out what areas might be taken up in a machine by certain, units or devices, or we'd grab a book or a box and just lay stuff out to go, how does this look? We wouldn't build sophisticated prototypes. We'd just grab what we had. And that gives you a sense of it. Use things to hand. The hovercraft, apparently, the principle was tested with a baked bean can and a hairdryer, apparently, just to see if the basic concept worked. I love that idea of crude prototypes. And we can prototype simple things in our business by simplifying down, using averages, just going and trying something simply.
I like this idea of kind of not necessarily working on one piece at a time and perfecting it versus let's get done what we need to, like this gentleman was doing with the vehicles. Man, he had that down. He had it down. He didn't have the other pieces, but he had that part down. And what he really needed was, let's get a little bit of everything figured out, or at least the things that we need to operate the business. And then once we kind of have a working model, then we can see what our customers, clients, potential partners, employees, what they think about it, right? Because in our head, it's like, oh, this is the only thing that matters. It's like we haven't done any testing. And I think, just getting to market, you learn so much. I'm developing a software right now, and we're in a testing phase. And it's interesting because all the things that I thought mattered, not necessarily matter to other people. And when we get fixated on one specific thing, which, as you mentioned, is usually something that we're really good at as human beings, we enjoy doing things that we're good at, things that come easy to us, things that we're natural at. But the companies that really make a difference are the ones that turn their weaknesses into strengths. They say, okay, I'm really good at this already. It's natural for me to focus on this. And I'm not saying it's a bad thing, right? If you're a sales organization, you have great salespeople, by all means. But let's not focus on that solely at the exclusion and at the detriment of the rest of our business, because in the end, that could come back to get us a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. And perfectionism can be a real crippling factor for a lot of businesses and business owners. I mean, I'm a recovering perfectionist. I'm the master of knowing this one.
Yeah.
But yes, it's knowing what needs to be just good enough for now, because it's going to change. And there's one or two things do need to be as good as you can get, but most things don't. Most things need to be good enough. And that idea of roughing out the design, working around each corner, because there's different bits, as you said, of the business to get right. And if you perfect one corner of your business and then move on to the next, by the time you've got to element 3, 4, or 5, you'll find that it doesn't fit. It's not, it doesn't sit compatibly, or it's not profitable. This going back to the figures. You've got a perfect product, but nobody wants to buy it at the price you need to charge.
Gotcha.
Wham, you're in the business already.
Yeah. What tips or tricks do you have for entrepreneurs that know that there are certain areas of their business they need to work on? They just don't want to do it. That's not where they want to spend their time. What's the motivation? Do they do it at a certain time? Maybe they start with those things and maybe they spread it out over a period of time. What are some ideas that you have to kind of motivate them to kind of just get down and get their hands dirty?
Well, firstly, it's really good to know yourself when you do certain tasks better than others. I know my best focus time for thinking is early in the morning. So I like to, if I've got to write proposals, write training plans, whatever it is needs that focus, I like to do that early. There's other more practical tasks I like to do in the afternoon. So the first thing is know your energy, know when you've got the right mindset for the kind of task. But the other thing I kind of suggest is do big tasks in stages. Don't feel you've got to start a task and finish a task with it perfect. So, for example, if I've got a training or something I'm delivering, or a seminar or a talk, and I'm doing it from scratch, I won't sit down and write it all in one go. What I will do is I will sit down and rough it out. I will put the bare skeleton down of that talk or workshop. Then I'll come back a few days later and I'll put the meat on it. And then I'll come back a few days later or a week later and I'll polish it and refine it. Because through that process, my unconscious is working on how to make it better. And the sooner I start a big complex task, particularly one I'm scared of, the sooner I start it to go, I'm going to spend an hour and I'm going to rough it out. And then I'll leave it a week and come back and add to it and come back a week and perfect it. It takes the fear out because, we avoid what we're scared of. We like to win. So if we can be more successful doing the things we're good at, or, people starting out from home, it's easier to go and make tea and toast, because we can win at it, or put it on the washing. We're going to win at that task. We can't lose. And we'll avoid writing the marketing plan or looking at the finances and going, here's the sales targets. Here's my expenses. I've got a plan for profit now. I've got a budget for the year to work to. Let's not do that. Let's make the coffee and the toast.
So do you have an amount of time that you recommend that an individual is attacking one of these projects that they don't necessarily want to do, that they know they're going to, come back to later? Is it 15 minutes? Is it 2 hours? What does that time frame look like for you?
To be effective? Well,
Exactly.
generally, I think most people can sort of focus for 40 minutes to an hour and a half. And again, you've got to know yourself. And I tend to work on being able to do 3 chunky bits of work a day, which is a 45-minute to an hour and a half task. And I can do about 3 of those in a day. The rest is filler activities. And one of my simple time management tricks is 3 notes on 3 tasks on a Post-it. I put those 3 tasks that move my business forward most that day on a Post-it, and then I have 3 kind of 15-minute tasks that are, like that important phone call that you're dreading doing, but you need to make, or that email you must write, but it's the critical one. So I have 6 things. 3 are mission critical, 3 are nice to haves, and that focuses my day. All the rest is filler around that. So that gives me real focus because I love getting those ticked off, but it's achievable. And if it's a task that looks too big to do in that 45-minute window or an hour's window, I'll simplify it down. I'll go, what bit of that task can I get done in that period? So that's kind of time management, knowing your energy. But in terms of thinking strategically, it does depend on where the business is. But it is, you've just got to at least once a week step back and go, what will move my business forward? And you've got to spend at least an hour a week thinking about that, if not more.
Yeah, I think that's fantastic. I think that it's a big problem for a lot of business owners because we're so busy, we're so much with action that we're having a hard time putting the thought and the preparation into it. But when you're kind of focusing on, hey, what am I going to do that's going to move the needle of my business? you're going to have to first answer the question, well, what does it mean to me for my, for my business to, move the needle? Like, what does that mean? What do I want with my business? And those things change over time. In the beginning, it's like, hey, I just want to get out of the first 6 months. I want to make it 6 months without, giving up or, closing up shop. And then once you get a few years down the road, you can put some money together and do some different things. And then all of a sudden, it's not really about money. You continue to do it, even though you don't have to. And when you start with that, hey, why am I doing this? What are my objectives? I think it will really help a business owner when they're like, well, how should I spend my time? Okay, well, let's go back to those objectives. Like what are the things that me and my team have agreed upon that we're going to, push for in this business? And it helps. I love this conversation. I think it's something that doesn't get talked about enough in terms of how we should use our time. It's the only, commodity that we don't get more of. I can't create more time, right? I don't even, and one of the biggest problems, Martin, is I don't know how much time I have.
Yeah.
Right? We don't know.
Yeah. No, we don't. And strategic goals, this is all about being strategic and doing the things that move us forward. And strategic goals take time, money, and energy that just isn't readily available. Otherwise, every person on the planet would achieve amazing things. We have to carve out time, and it takes resource, it takes sacrifice. And it's that willingness to dig that bit deeper, but also to know yourself and when you can dig deep and when you need to recover a bit and when you need to take time out. And so you've got to develop a lot of self-awareness. But if you do that, you also become a better boss, a better leader, because you can see in others when they're flagging, when they need. It's actually better to say, take the afternoon off, go and recover a bit. You've dug deep, but you'll be more used if you've had some time out and come back refreshed.
I always say that the quickest way to learn something about yourself is to start a business. I would also add to that, enter into a long-term relationship. You learn a lot about yourself in those two. This conversation has been fantastic, Martin. I appreciate, you sharing all this great wisdom with us. Where can somebody go if they want to learn more about the business jet engine? They want to learn more about all the great things that you have going on.
Well, the book is the simplest place to start, which is available on Amazon. But also, if they go to my website, businessjetengine.co.uk, there's some free downloads that give them a very quick introduction to this kind of 17-part model, which they can try out as a little interactive thing where they can score their business. And the email sequence will talk them through what to do next. So that's another great place to look. They can go and play with it pretty quickly. So the book or the website, businessjetengine.co.uk. And the homepage has all my socials, so they can connect with me on there.
Okay, perfect. We'll make sure to link that in the show notes. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Allan, it's an absolute pleasure. Love talking with you. Thank you.
If you have enjoyed today's podcast, please leave us a rating. And for daily inspiration and business tips, follow Allan on Instagram. Until next time, remember, we build the future one entrepreneur at a time.